You're watching Stock Watch. I'm Zinati Kuma, and joining me to unpack your stock-related questions today are Zwelakhe Mnguni from Benguela Global Fund Managers and David Shapiro from Sasfin Securities. Be sure to send your questions through via email to stockwatch@bdtv.co.za, via SMS on 41392, or on X @BusinessDayTV using the hashtag StockWatch. Thank you so much for your time, gents. Of course, I can imagine with the flurry of earnings, what's really probably the main focus there is the tech stocks that are coming out with numbers this week. But actually something interesting, and I don't know if you gents have seen it, the slamming of Amazon, as it said that it's going to separately report the cost of tariffs next to their goods, because majority of their goods are made in China, and the Trump administration saying no, we actually did see some pressure on that stock. David, what's your reading of this?
It's funny, I was listening to it was an early morning press conference at the White House where they brought it up. And that woman, I can't stand her, Levitt, Leavitt. She's just one of these fearsome women, that makes you shut down. She's young. I think she's in her late 20s, a press secretary, but you don't get in her way, and she just takes you apart. But she called their Amazon's attitude hostile. And in fact, Amazon have responded and said, look, this was just an idea discussed at the low end of our imports. In other words, in a division which would handle the Temus and all those kind of imports, and that there was nothing official about it. So I think they jumped ahead of it, but it does show you how sensitive. And I just want to add one thing, Zanati, is that a lot of businesses, I watch the local news here as well, and a huge number of businesses are affected by this. There was a fashion designer, Rebecca Minkoff, who was also being interviewed. And you see the impact that these tariffs are going to have, and it's going to affect these smaller businesses as well, virtually put them out of business. So there is a response, and I think there's a response from businesses, and I think from the Trump administration point of view, they're getting very sensitive about it. It affects Walmart, Costco, all of that. Yeah. So this is just an added worry that they're facing about imports. It's a significant part of the lower end of the market here, food, clothing, and so on. Yeah. So we'll watch that space.
It's actually quite interesting, because in all the barrage of earnings that we're getting, the outlooks, you'll have these companies, they did great for the first quarter, and then the outlooks are murky. Some people don't even want to commit to an outlook at this point. Zwelakhe, and for me, it's quite surprising, because, why am I touching my mic? But it's quite surprising because as much as we've had this initial pressure, but we are seeing some developments moving in the right direction, including the easing of import duties on imported car parts. But is the outlook just still looking a lot cloudier, even with the easing of some of these pockets in that tariff landscape?
Yeah, look, I think we are getting close to a complete backpedaling. I think I saw a comment by one of the members of Trump's cabinet saying that the tariffs are too heavy for China, so China can't sustain them. But I'm sitting there thinking, if China can't sustain them, they should just sit back and relax. Their medicine is working. And the fact that they're worried about whether China would sustain it is one issue. So I think we've seen they came out with the proposal to essentially reduce the tariffs on some of the auto components so that they don't get double charged on steel imports, or at least the steel content of the imports. So I do think that we are getting closer and closer to a complete backtracking on this aggressive stance, and markets would probably breathe a sigh of relief. But there will be some things that have changed for the longer term.
Yeah.
So supply chains, guys are gonna try and take their supply chains away from China and put them in places where maybe there are more friendlier relations with the US. So there will be some relief really as these news are being leaked back. But I do think that we'll see a bit of a change, a structural change in some of these things.
Yeah, and a lot of companies also coming out and warning of higher prices in the US. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how the Fed responds to that and how Trump responds to the Fed. Let's come back home and take a look at the JSE counters. There's a question here on Boxer. Is Boxer worth buying at 69 Rand a share? I think a similar question came through last week, and I don't know if I discussed it with you, gents, but at 69 Rand a share, is Boxer looking good? Yeah, and particularly as we were talking about the lower cost goods in America, would things maybe look better here in South Africa? David.
Oh, who's to say? Hey, we discussed it last week. In fact, it's at the bottom end of the market, and it's probably where you want to be. You know, if you're going to play South Africa, I think that's the affordable sector. And I think I said last week as well, we knew very little about Boxer because those numbers were hidden in Pick and Pay's results. But as you see the results coming out, you realize what an important part of Pick and Pay it is.
Yeah.
So it's far better to have Boxer maybe than Pick and Pay. It's still going to struggle to get back a lot of lost shares. So I like it. You know, I like anything that services at the bottom end of the market. And that would include something like Capitec as well, who've just blown out all the other banks with incredible numbers.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you like South Africa, that's where you go.
Okay. Boxer may be better than Pick and Pay, but also Pick and Pay did themselves a favor by keeping a share of Boxer. But now just talking about the companies that are exposed on that lower end, there's also ShopRite. At this point, Zwelakhe, would you be looking at Boxer in competition with ShopRite?
Yeah, I'd look at Boxer. I mean, I agree with what David's saying. The lower end will become defensive as things get tighter in the economy. I think ShopRite is also well positioned, but ShopRite is working hard to actually move higher up in the value chain. I mean, they obviously have the Checkers brand and the USafe, and then they have the Checkers brand, but they're working really hard to compete on the Checkers brand on the higher end. So if I look at Boxer, I certainly think that it would be defensive in an environment like this.
All right. Well, let's get into property. Your opinion on Vukile Property Fund, and talking about defensive, I would imagine that Vukile is maybe one of the more defensive property counters, David.
Oh, well, it's a Spanish company now. It's there's more Spain there than there is South Africa.
Yeah.
And I think Lawrence Rapp has done very, very well identifying some good businesses.
Yeah.
I don't know much about the Spanish property market, but if you recall, if you go back to the 07, 08, this was wiped out. You know, I mean, this was one area where there was overextension, overbuilding, and it took them a long time. And it's so odd now that this is one of the desirable areas. But you know, it's in the number. So I think if you look at Vukile, it's probably 60-70% now of I don't know whether you want to say it in their rentals or their income, but it's a very important part. And certainly Lawrence, you know, likes this area. So yeah, it's expensive, but it's reliable. You know, it's probably one of the better places to be in the property market in South Africa.
And quite
But
interesting.
remember, you're buying Spain. You're buying Barcelona. No, not Barcelona. It's Madrid. You know.
Yes, yes.
They Catalonians.
Catalonia, yeah. But I mean, even with the, I guess, lower exposure to South Africa, I would imagine that it's still defensive because it's townships, it's rural areas, also talking about that lower end of the market, Zwelakhe, and even, I mean, just internationally now, what they're going into Portugal. So would you say that they maybe just have a healthy mix of geographical exposure here, Zwelakhe?
Yeah, look, I think, it's a similar theme in terms of this kind of sector, in terms of the lower end of the market in South Africa. So they're playing the good space in South Africa, and I think what we saw in Spain, the numbers were actually phenomenal. I think the net operating income grew by about over 10%, and they have negligible vacancies. SA is about 2%, but very good portfolio holding. I think it's a good stock, very well run. I'd be cautious about an aggressive expansion in these times. Things could turn, and they might be caught up again. But as things stand, I think it's a good business.
All right. Well, let us go into telecoms, and I'm actually Googling now because the viewer has come with a rumor. Yes, Googling, David. Has come up with a rumor that there might be a listing of Cell C. But okay. The question says, Blue Label can Blue Label double in a year with rumors of listing Cell C as an IPO? Capitec Connect going to double from here. Capitec Connect is using Cell C, right? So I guess with a potential IPO of Cell C, maybe Blue Label could, I don't know, eke out some value. But also, David, what would you make of an IPO of Cell C?
It's such an interesting business because you mentioned the mobile businesses, because you've seen Vodacom and both MTNs show incredible. In fact, they've been one of the big support pillars for the all share indexes gain this year, and it's done well together with others, of course. And I think along with the ride comes Blue Label. Cell C has never really enraptured this market. It's never really captured. It's always been under pressure, and maybe this is the turnaround that they're talking about. I don't know whether it's in the results yet. I don't know. The share price has rocketed. Share price is up 35%. And, in a market where margins are incredibly tight. Also, if they go out on their own, at the moment they're renting a lot of space from, call it space, I don't know what the correct word would be, from MTN, or I think that, they're doing deals where they're not really responsible for their own capex, etc. Can they capture the market? I don't know. The trend says yes. If you look at the trend of the market, certainly the market's supporting that something there is happening. But I'm not sure it's evident in pure fact in pure numbers at the moment. I think with all of them, it's always, for me, it's a difficult industry. I keep saying everybody wants data but doesn't want to pay for it. So when you've got customers who don't want to pay for the data, they sit in Starbucks or here I see them down the road in the Capital One cafe where you get free internet. You're always bumming around, full of students. It's a tough market, but let's give them the credit at the moment. While the trend is in their favor. Can they double? I'll leave that to Zwelakhe to answer.
That's actually, it's a tough market, but the cycle seems that they're in a good cycle. Zwelakhe, I think we do have to take a quick break, but I'm going to come back to you with a Blue Label. To our viewers, do keep sending those questions coming via email to stockwatch@bdtv.co.za, via SMS on 41392 or on X @BusinessDayTV using the hashtag Stockwatch. We'll get to them right after this.